Have you ever wondered if the accommodations the school is giving your child are really what they need? A very frustrated mom of a 7-year-old with reading challenges once said to me, "I don't want my son accommodated." This wasn't a stubborn parent or a parent in denial. Maybe this is you. Of course, you want supports in place at school to help your child feel more successful. But fewer spelling words or taking tests orally, while valuable at the moment, are not going to help your child be successful. Parents will settle for accommodations if they don't believe there's another option. But in most cases of learning difficulties, there is another way. This is LD Expert Live. As a parent, when your child is struggling, you may feel like you can hardly breathe. You search for answers and you'll do almost anything to help, if only you knew what that was, right? I remember getting to the end of a parent information night at one of our centers, and a mom said, "Now I can exhale." Today, we'll be talking to cognitive consultant Alexandra Dunnison about what to do when your child is struggling, how to get to the root of the problem, where to get the right kind of help wherever you are in the world, and why we can so confidently say that most learning difficulties can be permanently resolved. Welcome to LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning differences, dyslexia, and attention challenges. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers and author of At Wit's End, A Parent's Guide to Ending the Struggle, Tears, and Turmoil of Learning Disabilities. This book will help you better understand your bright but struggling student and what can be done to help. To get a free copy, go to parentsatwitsend.com. Let's start today by saying hello to Lauren and all of you who have joined us live. Good morning,
Hi.
Lauren.
Good morning. Hi to everyone who's out there and watching us live. Let us know that you're here and where you're checking in from. We'd love to see all the people all over the country, all over the world, really. We've had some viewers in other parts of the world as well. So say hi, let us know where you're checking in from. We're doing a poll. We are doing a best of show that will be broadcast on January 5th. It is the best of 2020, best LD Expert Live episode of 2020. We have 6 finalists. So be sure to get your vote in. Polls close tonight and the competition is stiff. We have over 2,000 votes already and counting. So be sure to vote for your favorite episode of 2020 and we'll have our best of show, our top 3 finalists airing on January 5th, 2021. So that's exciting. Don't forget about Mom Squad. That is our private Facebook group. That is a community that we are starting of parents of children and teens with learning and attention challenges. It's a private Facebook group. It's a place to ask questions, get resources and support from other parents. We have a discussion going on right now about video games, kind of piggybacking off of last week's episode about video games and how much screen time is appropriate. I'm sure a lot of parents are dealing with that right now. And another resource for you starting in January will be our Peace group. That is a parent support group, parent enrichment and continued education. We are going to run it through Mom Squad as a resource for you, but also conduct it like a Zoom meeting so you can participate, comment, ask questions in real time. I'll be hosting that for you starting in January. And we go through Jill's book and we discuss the chapters. We talk about how it relates to your child and your life, and hopefully get you some of your questions answered. So thanks for participating in that. And thank you to everyone who's joined Mom Squad lately. We get new members every single week. So that's been exciting. We do have some people already saying hi. Here is Mona from, let's see. Yeah, we know her from the Pasadena area. Thank you, Mona. And we have Christine from Massachusetts. Ooh, wow. Welcome. Thank you for participating. And as far as today's show, we got another one. Here we go. Texas checking in. Hi, welcome. As far as today's show, one of the joys about LD Expert Live and doing this show is that we get to meet and talk with all these like-minded professionals. And it's been such a joy just to meet, these people that are serving kids and teens and families. And so today's guest absolutely is a like-minded professional. So I'm really excited to hear what she has to say about something we've been talking about for a long time, neuroplasticity. So that's really exciting. Really looking forward to today's show.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. We will check back in a bit. If you're just joining us, this is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell. Our guest today is Alexandra Dunnison. As a cognitive consultant, Alexandra finds long-term solutions to increase abilities and overcome or greatly minimize learning difficulties and improve other cognitive processes. These include attention, memory, auditory processing, sensory sensitivities, academics, reasoning, executive function, processing speed, reading nonverbal cues, anxiety, sleep, digestive tract imbalances, and some movement difficulties. Alexandra helps families navigate through the complex and ever-changing and expanding neuroplastic options. She helps families find the best solutions tailored to their individual needs. Her extensive experience and large active client base with their diverse challenges inform her recommendations. As well, she has developed a vast network of trusted therapists and programs worldwide. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you.
Wow, it's so great to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
The first time we talked, I knew I had found a kindred spirit when it comes to learning and what is possible for students with learning difficulties.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that everyone knows exactly what a cognitive consultant does. So let's start off by talking a little bit about what you do and why it's so unique.
Mm-hmm. So as a cognitive consultant, I'm really focused on cognition versus content. When people when people come to me, families come to me with a child who is struggling, or sometimes it's themselves, it could be an adult who is struggling. They come and they are concerned about academics, but oftentimes there are a lot of other things that come along with that. So there could be sleep issues, gut disturbances, anxiety or depression, so many different things that come in the mix, and they really don't know where to start. So as a cognitive consultant, I'm trying to unwrap that for them. Do they see a tutor, a psychologist, a doctor, a nutritionist? Like, where do they start? Where is the actual problem? So when I work with them, I try to get as much understanding as I can about the problem by looking at all the assessments they've had and having a thorough interview with the families on the history, what the child likes and dislikes, their strengths, their weaknesses, sensitivities. Sometimes they have sound sensitivities, light sensitivities, food sensitivities. They come hand in hand. So a child just doesn't have trouble reading. There's a lot of other things that come with that. So what do we attack first, in a sense, and in what order? I help them look at the underlying issues that are causing the problems and help them with a roadmap to find solutions to these problems.
So how did you happen to get into that field? I mean, there aren't very many people that do exactly what you do.
That's true. I don't know if I've ever come across anyone who does exactly what I do, but when I worked in a cognitive intervention program, I really felt there was a great need for that. There's so many wonderful programs, therapies, neuromodulation devices, wonderful things, but families just don't have access to that information. And I was finding that I wanted to help my clients more, my students more, whoever they were, adults, family, or children. And I needed to dig deeper. I needed to learn more. So I started to really do a lot of research in neuroscience and neuroplastic interventions, which I'll talk about more in depth later. and have my families try some of these things, and found that they were making much better progress.
And you actually came out of the field of education. I mean, many aspects of it. So tell us a little bit about that, because
yes, yeah. So I've taught elementary school, high school. I actually worked in educational publishing, developing some of the best reading programs. Actually, I worked for the largest school reading division in the United States, North America, actually, and also in Canada, developing reading programs, doing research on reading programs. I was a literacy mentor in my elementary school. So I have a lot of teaching experience, and I worked with a lot of kids who were struggling of all ages. So I have that informs everything that I do.
Yeah, I really like that, because you've got both the inside and the outside view of what can happen inside the schools. So, you mentioned neuroplastic interventions, which I know is a huge focus for you, and we are going to be talking about that in a minute. But that's just something that parents really want to pay attention to, because that's the kind of intervention that is most likely to make permanent change. Exactly. Talking with thousands of parents over the years, I know that when your child has a learning or attention problem, you feel confused and alone. Is it your fault? Is it your child's fault? Is it the teacher? Should you be doing something different? What are relatives and friends going to say if they know that your child can't keep up? And then one day your child comes home and says, I'm the dumbest kid in the class. And you just know you have to do something, but what? So the logical choice for many parents is to turn first to the schools. Can you talk a little bit about what the schools can and can't do?
Yeah, so school mandate is really to teach content and to support students. That is what they do. That's what their mandate is, and that is what their educational background is. So their tools are generally methods of instruction and how to manage classrooms and students, behavioral techniques and things like that. And those are all amazing things and important. But they might understand a little bit about what the symptoms of a diagnosis like dyslexia or dysgraphia look like, but they don't really they don't have any education in how to improve that, only on how to accommodate it. They don't have, teachers aren't taught about the brain, how the brain functions, and what are the parts of the brain responsible for things like dysgraphia or dyslexia. So of course, they can't provide information to parents about those options because they are not familiar with those options.
Right. And, you talked a little bit about compensations or accommodations, and, they are valuable for the moment, but it's not the same thing as really solving that problem. They're pretty temporary.
Exactly. So a compensation or an accommodation is basically looking at the, outside that person, right? How can we support them with this difficulty? And we all compensate. If your memory is not as strong as someone else's, you may take more notes. You may have to record a session. All these things we do, and everyone has compensation. So compensation in itself is not necessarily bad, but when you have many compensations for many weaknesses, it really interferes with your life. If my mental math isn't so good, so I rely more on a calculator. But if I had to do that and record something and reread it 10 times and and have someone else take notes for me because I couldn't, and all these other things, it would definitely interfere with my life. So a real life example outside of academics would be something like I break my leg, and then I go, if I do something too soon, like physio, when my body is not yet healed, it will interfere with that process. I don't want to have crutches for life, but I need them for now. That's my compensation. So now I take the compensation. I need it until I can wait for my bones to heal, and I do my physio and all those things. But we want to strengthen the leg. We don't want to have crutches for life if we can do something about that. And in most cases, as you said, these learning difficulties can be resolved or minimized greatly. So we need fewer compensations or no compensations, which is, to me, is a much better outcome.
Absolutely. I love that example. That really explains it really well. You know, you and I were both teachers in a previous life, and as unfair as it may seem, the kind of intervention that is needed to permanently resolve learning challenges isn't something that you should expect to get from the schools. As you said, Alexandra, their job is to help students access the curriculum, the content. And for struggling students, that's usually in the form of accommodations and more individualized support with those school subjects. When parents do begin to look outside of the schools for help, they often think that the intervention has to be academic. My child has a reading problem, therefore we need work on reading. What most people don't realize is that the reason the student has difficulty with reading or academic skills is because there are underlying supporting skills that are missing or not well developed. So that's where that idea of neuroplastic interventions come in. Our goal at Stowell Learning Centers, and I know your goal for your clients as well, is to resolve learning difficulties completely. So let's talk about how that is even possible.
Yes. I love the way that we are so aligned in that you can so unapologetically say resolve them permanently. And you and I completely believe that, and we've seen it. It's so great to be able to talk with someone who has seen that and has that, you know, it's in our soul that we know this is something that we can do for people. We can help resolve these issues. And it is due to the brain's neuroplastic nature. So what this means is that the brain is capable of changing throughout life due to its experiences. That's what neuroplasticity is. So it's neurons from neuro and plasticity from being able to change, be plastic, modifiable. When neurons talk to each other, they create new networks. So that actually changes the structure of the brain. So it's not just that it changes function, it really changes structure. When I was doing some training in the cognitive program, one of the people said, that we were studying, it was a famous neuroscientist, said, we can be the architects of our own brain. And I just really loved that. And neuroplasticity has been around since the 1800s. People think it's a new thing, but it's not a new thing. It's just that now we can measure it by looking into brains. We can actually watch neurons connecting, pruning, adapting. We can actually see it. So we have proof of it. Before it was more theory, but now we know it's hard science. One thing about neuroplasticity is it's not neither good nor bad. So something like OCD is also because of neuroplasticity. You do something over and over again, and it can wire in anxiety, OCD, and those things. But due to the neuroplastic nature of the brain, we can also fix those things.
Right. With training, then the brain can create a new pathway.
Exactly.
Which is so exciting. So brains are pretty complicated. You know, we find it's not usually just one thing that will solve everything. It's not one program. And I know you made the statement when we were talking earlier, you said it's not the program, it's the problem. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think this really helps tie into my background in education. When I worked in education and I helped develop reading programs, and I was a literacy mentor, and I worked with so many children with troubles with reading. people will often ask me, well, what about this reading program or that reading program? What about Wilson? What about Orton Gillingham? What about Linda Mood Bell? What about all these other, or specifically Houghton Mifflin? What, specifically. But what I know from working with children and adults, it's not the program that's the problem. There are lots of wonderful programs and many different ways of actually teaching reading. It is about what is going on in your brain. Learning happens in your brain. Sometimes we forget that that's your brain that is functioning to help you to learn. So when kids have the parts of the brain intact that are needed to be able to read with ease, it doesn't really matter what program you use. It almost happens overnight, even though reading is actually a difficult process for the brain. But when children struggle because of their brain weaknesses, then no program will help completely until those issues are resolved.
Right. And the thing that is that's so confusing for people is, they do kind of think, okay, well, it's a reading problem. That's a higher cognitive function. That's where I have to work. But it isn't just about cognition.
Exactly. So the cognitive, our cognition is in the top of our brain. So what that means is that that's the cortex, and the cortex is only between 2 and 4 millimeters thick. So what is happening in the rest of that head of ours? A lot of things. Development starts from the brainstem up. So we have to go back and look at where the development went awry. If we're just looking at the cortex and teaching academics is really directed towards those higher functions in your cortex, then we're missing a lot of pieces.
That's really interesting that you talked about these, the problem isn't always that high in the brain. A few weeks ago, Lauren and I did an episode centered around retained primitive reflexes and their connection to learning. Integrating these reflexes doesn't look like academics at all, but it can make all the difference for a student in being physically and mentally organized in order to learn in school. I remember a little boy we worked with who was just kind of lagging in all areas at school. He was smart and sweet, and he tried really hard, but he just couldn't keep up. He had had several surgeries as an infant, which kept him immobilized. And because he couldn't move in those first few months, integrating primitive reflexes and laying the foundation for learning just didn't happen for him. So at the Learning Center, we did reading development for him, but the most important thing in his program was reflex integration and foundational visual, auditory, and motor skills development. Once those skills were in place, he was able to learn to read, and he became a very typical third grade student, not needing any extra help. And I'm sure you have many stories like that yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I also work with adults in this cognitive program, it was very interesting because you can sometimes think that with children, they've just gone through a developmental stage. But with adults, that they've gone through lots of different programs and interventions, and now their brain is matured, and they suddenly do this cognitive neuroplastic intervention, and then things change. So I had a 42-year-old who came to the center where I was working, and she described to me that she did not play well with others. That is how she introduced herself. So I don't play well with others. And I was like, this is going to be interesting because we have a center with a lot of adolescents, and how are they all going to get along? So as she was doing this cognitive program, it seemed like her personality was changing. So the stubbornness and this rigidity that we attribute to personality is often actually a result of problems with reasoning. It's in the brain. And after a year in the program, she returned to some community college courses because she had put them on hold. And her tutor said to her, "Who are you? And what have you done with Sharon?" And she came and she told me this story. But so many people were telling her this. And as well, little things like being able to tie her shoes. She had never been able to tie her shoes. And after working on the part of the brain responsible for conceptual understanding, she was able to learn to tie her shoes. So there are so many incredible stories like that.
That's amazing. There are so many connections, and what's hard as a parent, you know, I mean, we work in this all the time, so we see all these little things like the change in personality or what looks like maturity. I remember working with a young man. He was in his late 20s, and it was like he matured as we were working. Well, he was already mature, but the way he was processing the world wasn't as mature because he wasn't getting the information that he needed. And as his brain was able to more quickly and accurately perceive what he was hearing, you know, he seemed more mature. So it's just fascinating how everything is connected, and you know, parents don't always equate some of those changes, the changes in humor, in soccer, in, you know, getting along with the interventions that we're doing, really ultimately targeting reading. You know, it's
Exactly.
the brain is amazing. We could probably kind of nerd out on that all day, right?
Absolutely.
Well, if you're just joining us, this is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers, and my guest today is Alexandra Dunnison, a cognitive consultant based in Washington State and working with families all around the world. We're talking about the kind of intervention that's needed in order to permanently change learning difficulties. Let's check in with Lauren and our viewers.
Hello. So if you have questions or comments and want to be part of this conversation, please post in the chat. Continue to say hi. Tell us where you're from. We have some more people checking in from all over the country. It's amazing. We have Debbie from Seattle, and we have Elena from Pennsylvania. Great. Jacqueline from a special needs attorney from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Welcome. And then we have Teresa checking in, really enjoying this program. Jill, are you or Alexandra familiar with the Arrowsmith program, and how does it fit into the neuroplastic intervention?
Well, Alexandra, I'm going to give you that one. I am familiar. Alexandra's even more familiar.
That's true. So I actually worked for the Arrowsmith program for 10 years, and I'm extremely familiar with that program. I sort of feel I know it inside and out. And it is an excellent cognitive intervention. I definitely refer people to it, but again, there's no one particular program that's going to resolve all your problems, or one device, or one solution. It usually is a package deal, but it is an excellent cognitive program, and it does have long-lasting changes. Definitely, I worked with children and adults in the program. Great.
We have some more people checking in. This is great. Susan, locally from Chino. Welcome, Susan. Jacqueline just says, excellent program. Thank you. Namita, I hope I'm saying that right, from Virginia. Welcome. And Teresa is saying she's from Well Schooled, also locally, San Marino, close to our Pasadena Center. So welcome. Thank you. Colleen, I know Colleen from Camarillo, close to our Thousand Oaks Center. This is just a reunion. This is fun, a community of like-minded parents and professionals. Love this. This is why we have Mom Squad. So thank you. I do have, again, if you have a question or a comment and want to post, go ahead and do that. You can also private message me in Mom Squad. I do have a couple of questions that were PM'd to me earlier. One, we kind of already touched on this about a reading program. A lot of parents ask this question. My child has trouble reading. Can you tell me a particular program that you would recommend? So they want to know the reading program that's going to, you know, solve all their problems. And you kind of touched upon this before, Alexandra, that it's not really just about a reading program, correct?
Correct. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
would never, that's not something I would do either. I don't refer to traditional methods, not because they're bad, but just because that's not what I do, right? There are a lot of people who that is their role, and not that, you know, I know a lot of those programs, but my expertise now is really more in neuroplastic interventions. That's what I really keep up on. And I don't feel that referring to a program is something that will be helpful to my client in terms of why they come to me.
Right, absolutely. And we see this all the time. I mean, we get this question a lot in our intake process when we're doing consultations with parents. They ask, like, well, just tell me the reading program to do that's going to fix everything. And if you know, viewers that have been with us, and if they know our program, the Learning Skills Continuum, we've talked about that before, about and if you can visualize, or I think we have the overlay, if we talk about a reading program is really one of those higher levels that's up in that orange tier.
Mm-hmm.
Up there it is, basic academic skills. So I was a teacher as well. We have a bunch of former teachers on this show today. And so when I taught reading, yes, I had a lot of, you know, excellent programs that were state approved that could teach reading. But if a student doesn't have the lower level skills in place, he or she still had difficulty accessing that content and that curriculum. It doesn't matter how I taught it. I had a little boy when I taught second grade that did not process the R sound, and he didn't pronounce it in speech. He could never say the R sound. And guess what? When he learned how to read and write, he never said the R sound in reading. It's like he almost didn't see it, and he never spelled it. And so for him, he was missing that auditory piece down below in processing skills. So it didn't matter which reading program I used. He was missing an underlying skill. And unfortunately, that stayed with him through school. And so really, when parents are asking for a specific reading program, that is not the work that we do either. We are always trying to address the underlying issues that are contributing to the learning challenges. So then students can go on and learn with the reading programs that are offered at their school. So it's great that we have a like-minded professional. We have, the discussion is heating up. So we have Vita from Menlo Park, California, up north in California. We have Teresa is asking, would you mind also telling us about neurofeedback and when or whether it's appropriate, an appropriate neuroplastic intervention? Do you have any insight on that? Neurofeedback.
Jill, you want to take this one?
Yeah. So there is neurofeedback can be one very effective piece of the puzzle. Our guest next week, Dr. Licata, does neurofeedback brain training, and we have partnered with him some with our students and been involved in the conferences. So we've really gotten to see what happens there. I think it depends a lot. Over the years, we've had a number of families that have tried neurofeedback and they have been a little disappointed in the results. But I think, you know, the thing is, it's a piece of the puzzle. Now, when we've worked with Dr. Licata with neurofeedback, you know, he has really targeted some things very specifically that then we could support in the Learning Center to help the student, you know, de-stress, to help them move into a better state of attention and engagement and motivation. So in that sense, you know, we've seen some really good changes. As Alexandra said, it isn't probably going to be the whole picture of what the child needs to correct their learning challenges.
Absolutely. And we know, I mean, just from years and years of doing this work, the brain's dynamic, and it's never we wish it was as simple as one quick fix
Right.
it all, right? But brains need a lot of intervention. Thinking about our reflexes show, we talked about that foundation, that reflexes provide this foundation, and then our brain matures and is dynamic and works with all these underlying skills. And that takes years and years to develop. So of course, when you retrain the brain, that takes some time and a lot of different approaches as well to retrain the brain. So it makes sense. But I do understand, being a parent myself, wanting, I want the solution now. I want it to be one thing over and done with. So I understand that. We have Tammy asking an insurance question. We get this a lot. How can we get insurance on board with some of these therapies? I have great insurance, but they still don't cover some of these non-medical or non-traditional methods.
I don't know if you've run into that, Alexandra. Unfortunately, anything educational is generally not considered medical enough to cover on insurance. I mean, it's happened very occasionally. More often, if the challenge is related to a head injury or something that actually can be proved to be medical. So I think it continues to need, the system needs continued education, and someday we may get there.
Yeah, I would say I completely agree with that. The kinds of things that we do are really based in science, right? And neuroscience, it's not education per se, but so actually medical insurance should recognize that, but they haven't caught up yet, right? Mm-hmm. They don't really understand that these are science-based interventions that are because of our knowledge about how brains work, right? And a lot of the therapies or interventions that we use are like some of the auditory interventions. They're developed by doctors, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep. And Alexandra, it seems you have a fan here. Chris from Seattle. Our family works with Alexandra, and she is very knowledgeable, passionate in her field, and is such a great resource. So there you go, a testimonial and a shout out from Chris.
Thanks,
Thank you. And Tammy is kind of just piggybacking off that insurance thing. Also these interventions help mental health. Absolutely, we know that. Yeah, we do. So thanks to everyone. Keep posting questions or comments. I'll check back in once more to make sure we get to everybody. If you have a question, feel free to post in the chat or PM me if you are in Mom Squad, and I'll see you in a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. I'm Jill Stowell here with cognitive consultant Alexandra Dunnison. We've been talking about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself and the application of that to resolving learning difficulties. In order to create the best plan for each student at the Learning Center, we do a functional academic and learning skills assessment. We want to see where the student is in reading, writing, spelling, and math, but even more important is looking at how the changes, how the challenges look for each individual student. What is really at the root of that behavior or difficulty that the parent is seeing. So I know you also are trying to ferret out the real problems so that you can match students up with the right kind of services. What are some of the things that you explore with parents in order to understand where the student really is and what they need?
Yeah, so I look at all the assessments like you do, like psych ed assessments. I'm looking at achievement tests and all those things. But really, a lot of what's covered in those doesn't get to the root of the problem. Some of it does, but they don't ask parents about gut issues, sleep issues, sensory issues that much, right? You sometimes see it depends on the assessment. Those things give us a lot of information about what is happening in the brain and how that's affecting learning. If I know that a child has sensory processing difficulties, of course they're going to have challenges learning because we learn through our senses. That's how we take in information. All of our senses, our vision, our hearing, our touch, sends messages to our brain. That is that is what neurotransmitters are basically. It's electrical and chemical signals, right? That come in through our ears and our eyes and our touch and other sensory information, right? So if the child is having trouble with, something that it feels too cold, too hot, too loud, not loud enough, textures with food, that's telling me that the nervous system is not bringing in sensory information properly. So for me to say, well, let's start with a reading program or a writing program or a math program doesn't really make sense to do as a standalone when I know that the senses are not receiving the information properly.
Right. And, thinking about that, when just that sensitivity issue, if a child is really oversensitive, then their system is kind of operating in that high alert state. And that is going to get in the way of their attention. They're going to have trouble really paying attention and taking in that information the teacher is giving them, which then looks like memory issues because the information coming in was spotty. But really the culprit for that could be, much lower level with that sensory processing.
Absolutely. So attention issues, when someone comes and says their child has an attention issue, I want to know not the label, not ADHD, but what is driving the inattention? Why are they having trouble attending? So as you said, if they're having sleep issues, if they can't process what they're hearing, all those things are going to affect attention. I often call it the Charlie Brown syndrome.
Right.
You know how the teacher's talking and you hear wow, 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 wow. That's what Charlie Brown is getting out of the teacher, nothing. Because Charlie Brown has either information overload, his memory can't withstand it, he can't process what the teacher is saying. All those things have his brain now interpreting that auditory information as noise. So we have to figure out how do we adjust that. And there are many interventions to help reduce those sensory sensitivities. Some of them are addressing nutritional kinds of things, vagal nerve, this is more complicated, but, and some of it's auditory therapies, auditory interventions that, as I said, are based in science and often developed by doctors, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's fascinating to really look functionally at what is happening to a student so that we can start to put that together with assessments and in parent interviews and see, wow, what is really at the root of this? Because on the surface, the parent might not connect those things necessarily, but they really are all a piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that one of my friends had told me, actually, who I've been helping with her child, she said, make sure you tell them how important it is to help the parents understand what's really going on for their child. Because, I'm a parent, you're a parent, we've all been through it. Sometimes we can't see our own child the same way. We're so close to it, right? And also we don't, as parents, before I did this work, when my children were little, I didn't have this expertise. I didn't have this toolkit or this understanding. And there are a lot of things that if I'd understood it better, I probably would have handled it differently. So helping parents understand, no, your child is actually not lazy. Quite to the contrary, your child is working harder than everyone else in the class. Mm-hmm. They are struggling against these different issues, these underlying auditory processing issues or anxiety issues that are showing up in other ways, that maybe they're not sleeping at night. All these things are causing them to have tremendous struggle. So everything that they're doing, they're putting in extra effort. So when they are giving up, it's because they have a reason to. It's so hard, they can't climb that mountain anymore. And so they just stop. But it's not because they're lazy, it's because of the difficulties. So helping them understand the difficulties, it also allows parents to go, oh, I can help my child and support them better now that I understand what it is they're struggling against.
Absolutely. I think that's huge. And I find talking to parents that they really do kind of exhale when they hear those things, because, you know, moms in particular, they just kind of in their gut know, but you know, they don't quite know exactly what they know. But, you know, as you start to talk about it, they're like, yes, I knew there had to be something under there. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think it really helps them as well, because they've often been given the message from other places that it's their fault, that they haven't structured their child's program properly, or there's something wrong with their child in the sense that, you know, their child is giving up, their child is lazy. I read a lot of report cards. I don't usually read report cards because they don't give me a lot of information, but when I do, sometimes the comments are what give me information. But a lot of the comments can be things like, well, they only tried harder. And my heart just breaks when I hear that, because I know that that isn't the reason why the child is struggling. The child is struggling, and that's why they can't do any more than they're doing.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you help families all around the world find the right programming and services in their area. How do you do that?
Well, I pretty much am researching every day. First of all, I'm just fascinated with everything that has to do with the brain. And so I just love the work. But yeah, there's so many things that are coming out all the time. So I'm always researching. I have a large client base. So I'm always getting feedback from them too about, you know, when I refer them to something, how did it work? Did they like the person they worked with? Did they like whatever that program was? And when I'm working with a family, let's say I'm working with a family in Australia, a lot of times they'll say they didn't find anything in their area, but it's because they didn't necessarily know what to look for. So I know what to look for. I already know what I'm looking for. I've read the assessments, I've done the interview, and I know what that child needs. So now I just have to find that intervention close to them. Obviously, if the person is in Australia, I'm not going to get on a plane to Australia, but there are a lot of ways to vet people, right? To vet professionals and programs and things like that. So I do my research. I won't recommend somebody oftentimes unless I've either had a phone consultation or Zoom or something like that, or that person's been highly recommended. So I know how to vet those people. I know the questions that I have the questions in mind that I want to ask. So not all, for example, vision therapists are alike, right? You just look, if I said, oh, just find a vision therapist, that's not very useful. They could just Google vision therapist, but they won't have the right questions to ask, right? They won't know what to ask to determine if that person's going to give them the best service. So I'm always looking for the best possible outcomes, not just whatever is available close by.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's huge, that, you know, parents know that they're looking for something, but it's really hard. There's a lot out there, and it's really hard to sort through and figure out what is really going to make the change that I'm looking for my child. So these interventions are often very specialized and not inexpensive. Do you have advice for families who find that kind of expense is challenging?
Absolutely. So for one, a lot of times people think, well, if I can't go to this program or do that device because of cost, then I'm not going to do anything. I'll just go back to the accommodations method. But there are so many options, and a lot of them are not expensive. So I would say everything that you do that's neuroplastic in nature, which means that's actually changing the function of your brain, is going to help. So don't be defeated. Start somewhere. And that's a lot of times where I can help. I provide a roadmap based on that person's specific needs. So the family tells me, it gives me an idea of how the family is functioning, what their resources are like, what kind of time they have to commit to it. Then I can help them decide which interventions they might do first. So just because they can't do the most expensive option doesn't mean they just do nothing. There's lots of other things that they can do.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about how, a lot of times there's more than one piece to this puzzle, and so starting, even if it's with a one small step, that makes a difference, and
Absolutely.
so start somewhere.
Right. And sometimes the other thing is that people feel it has to be something big, but sometimes it's just something like teaching someone to breathe properly.
Mm-hmm.
And that is huge. Breathing properly affects attention, affects sleep, affects digestion. And these are things, again, that are scientifically proven. This is not a theory. It is based in scientific knowledge, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a great discussion, Alexandra. Thank you so much. I think I would love to just continue this all day. But let's check back in with Lauren and our viewers before we wrap up for today.
So great. Namita was asking about our Mom Squad on Facebook and how to find that. We posted the link in the chat, so be sure to look for that. Or you can always search on Facebook, SLC Mom Squad, for a private Facebook group. So we provided that link. You're welcome to join. We had a lot of people asking about, and we referred to previous shows. So you can find all of our previous broadcasts on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel, LD Expert YouTube channel. You can subscribe and get notifications. This show is going to be on there. Someone was asking, let me see. Yes, so Sherry was asking, can I listen to this later or send it to my daughter-in-law? Absolutely. If you go to either our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, absolutely, this broadcast will be there if you're not able to view live. And Namita is asking, how can I get an appointment with Dr. Dunnison for my daughter? And Alexandra, we put your information in the chat. We are going to put up an overlay with your information. And I believe you said that you work with clients all over the world, correct? You're not limited by location?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Great. We have Teresa asking, do you require a comprehensive neuropsych before starting interventions?
I don't require it, but it is a useful piece of information. The more information I have, the better I am able to help people.
Yeah, and as far as our services, we don't. We do an initial assessment. It's a functional skills assessment. Again, we're looking at the underlying skills that are on that continuum. And so we do our own kind of investigation. We're really looking to see what is the root of a student's challenges with learning or attention or functioning behavior, all of those kinds of things. So we don't require a full neuropsych as well. We like to see the child and see how they respond to different tasks. So that's really important part of our process. I have another question here that was sent in Mom Squad asking about neuroplasticity. So she asked, does neuroplasticity apply when someone has a brain injury or a concussion? Can that be something that can be someone can recover from?
Yes, absolutely. And it's actually something I meant to bring into the conversation. So I do also deal with people with brain injury. Originally, I was working mostly in terms with people with learning problems, right? But really it has broadened so much because the brain is very complex. Traumatic brain injury or injury at birth, all these things can affect all the outcomes of a child or an adult. And absolutely, the brain is neuroplastic. So that means that it is always able to change and modify based on its experience. So the experience means input, right? When someone's recovering from stroke, for example, they go through rehabilitation and it changes their brain. In the past, those kinds of interventions were like 6 weeks, but we know now that recovery from brain injury can happen even 20 years later. You can go back and do some of these neuroplastic interventions and get good results. So yes, you can absolutely change your brain after brain injury.
The brain is so fascinating. And actually a lot of the studies on neuroplasticity have, a lot of the information that we have about it has come from, working with people with brain injury. And what they've found is with training, brain cells around the damaged area can begin adapting and taking over functions of that damaged area. And with regard to concussion, Dr. Norman Doidge, a psychiatrist who's done a great deal of work with neuroplasticity, really talks about how the brain can heal itself with training, that you don't have to live with post-concussion symptoms for life. And we certainly have seen that as we've worked with students who have had concussion from sports injuries and things at school. And absolutely, things can change with training. The brain is amazing.
Yes, Norman Doidge is one of my heroes.
Me too.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of his work has informed me in my practice, right?
Great. Well, thank you to everyone who's participated. We can tell this is something that definitely parents, everyone is interested in. So thank you for being part of the conversation and for your questions and comments. If we didn't get to your question or comment, you can always post in Mom Squad. Again, Mom Squad is our private Facebook group. We provided the link in the chat to request to join. It is a private group, so we do have some questions for you to answer before joining, just so that we make sure that we keep the group limited to parents of kids and teens with learning or attention challenges. We provide resources and support for each other there. And our peace meetings are coming in January, and we are going to run that through Mom Squad exclusively. So peace meetings are a parent support group meeting. We're going to be doing it virtually via Zoom. So you will get a link and be able to participate live in that conversation. We're going to go through Jill's book, At Wit's End, and discuss some of the chapters and how the testimonials in there and the stories and the research relates to you and your child. So stay tuned for the date coming up in January of our first meeting. And don't forget about our poll, our best of poll. Polls close tonight at 11:59 p.m. That is the poll. The link to that is on our Facebook page, on our social media, on Instagram. You can find the link to go and vote for your favorite LD Expert Live episode of 2020. We have 6 finalists, and again, the competition is fierce. So get your votes in. You can vote more than once. So go ahead. If you have a favorite, you can watch the past shows and vote on your favorite show of 2020. And the Best of LD Expert Live show will be broadcast on January 5th, 2021. Thanks, everyone, for your questions and comments. And thank you, Alexandra, for this information. We have people already. I don't want to make sure I get to everyone. This is so helpful, says Colleen. My daughter and her family moved to Texas, the Dallas area last year. We know of that family. Not easy to find the right help for her 8-year-old son. He was diagnosed here in California. So again, with just the testimonials from parents trying to find resources in their area. So this is so helpful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Alexandra, all our viewers and subscribers, thank you, Lauren. There is a lot happening. This is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell, here with our guest cognitive consultant, Alexandra Dunnison. Here is a quick recap for today. 1, accommodations are helpful for the moment, but in most cases, learning difficulties can be greatly improved or completely resolved so that accommodations are no longer needed. 2, making these changes is not about a program. It's about addressing the real root of the problem, and that doesn't always look like an academic intervention. 3, the brain research on neuroplasticity proves that with targeted training, the brain can rewire itself to process information more effectively. This is not new. The brain can change. 4, schools don't generally do this work, so you're going to need to look outside of schools and traditional tutoring. and 5, there is rarely just one thing needed to resolve a learning difficulty. If you feel like your child is getting appropriate interventions, but they aren't making the changes you expected, chances are there are lower level neurodevelopmental or processing skills that are weak or not developed enough that need to be addressed. Alexandra, what last thoughts do you have for our viewers today?
Well, what you recapped it very well. So basically, just that the brain can change with these interventions, and that these neuroplastic interventions are based in science, as opposed to other traditional methods are based more in education and sometimes in theory. And the theory is often that learning disabilities cannot be changed. Mm-hmm. Teachers are still often being taught that you can't resolve these issues, that learning disabilities are lifelong. But the distinction really is theory versus fact and science. So hopefully education will catch up with the neuroscience.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put up Alexandra's contact information. You might want to take a screenshot of this. Finding the right help for your struggling learner is challenging. Alexandra is a great resource for parents anywhere in the world because she can help you understand what you need to be looking for and link you up with professionals in your area who can help you get the best outcomes. This is LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. We're live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Next Tuesday, we'll be taking a look at some three-dimensional brain scans with our guest, Dr. Giancarlo Licata. We'll look at the impact of stress on attention, how brain scans can help determine the actual cause of the attention difficulties, and 5 ways to improve stress and attention at home. I had a little preview of the brain scans, and this is really fascinating. So be sure to join us next Tuesday at 10. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings, so we can work with students from wherever you are in the world. We are also seeing students on site with all of the COVID precautions. We work with children and adults doing targeted brain training to address the root of the learning or attention challenges and remediate the academic skills. If you would like a free consultation for yourself or your child, give us a call or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. Thank you again, Alexandra. Thank you to all of you who joined us. This was a really fun discussion today. Don't forget to vote for your favorite LD Expert show. We'll see you next week.